you know, those three key chapters, 10, 11, and 12 in the book of Matthew. 10 is where he sends out his apostles to preach the kingdom of heaven, go only to Israel. Then 11, he offers himself to Israel as their Messiah. They reject him by their silence. In chapter 12, he says, okay, go to the Gentiles. If these guys ain't taking it, I'll go to the Gentiles. That's the exact same thing that the Apostle Paul did in Acts chapter 22. Verses 1 through 21 in Acts chapter 22. It's right after he's been arrested. And he, at the end of verse 21, God said to him, I'll send thee far hence to the Gentiles. So God turned to the Gentiles twice. He turned to it as far as his people, giving the message out, and then as far as the vehicle that he's going to use to carry his word around the world. We're going to talk about one of the tougher parts of the Bible as far as the book of Matthew. We're going to talk about they call it the parables of the kingdom of heaven, and I'll give you the breakdown on them. And I don't want to say this. I don't want to sound like it's called a difficult part of Scripture to understand because it's actually not. Okay, this is not a difficult portion of Scripture. I'll tell you what messes you up. All right, according to the Bible, you technically quit being Gentiles when you got saved, correct? Just like a Jew technically quit being a Jew when he got saved, correct? But that doesn't mean that a guy that is Jewish by birth doesn't carry on those characteristics of a Jew. And Gentiles carry on those characteristics of Gentiles. Example, I knew a guy that was of Jewish lineage. He got saved. So he's no longer a Jew, right? Every thought he had was about $1. I mean, everything he thought about was $1. Any conversation he had, it was how he's going to make $1. So he was technically no longer a Jew, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 32. He's part of the church of God, but him inside, okay? Now let me tell you what Gentiles do. Gentiles, number one, Bible says that a Jew looks for a sign, seeks after a sign, but a Gentile goes after wisdom. We're the ones that like education. Gentiles study everything. Why are we going to the moon? Right? To study it. And they study everything, guys. They study on why a kid falls off a tricycle. They study everything. Gentiles do that. And that's what we're like. There's also something else about Gentiles. The original It's All About Me t-shirt was printed for a Gentile. Because Gentiles think that everything that happens is about them. And here's our problem. We were outsiders in this book, and so we come to it because it is a Jewish book, correct? So as having come from Gentile lineage, we come from outside of it, and yet we apply everything to ourselves. Every rapture is about me, which puts you halfway through the tribulation, and every verse is mine. There's some doofus out in Arizona. He says we're the replacement for Israel, and then he says, here's how he proves it. Every promise in the book is mine. That's what he literally sings that little ditty, and that's proof that every verse, every promise is ours. Hey guys, Genesis chapter 12 wasn't written to you. And we are not the replacement for the Jews. We are just added into his people along with the Jews, but those promises still go to them. And the reason I say that is, here's why people have a problem understanding these parables. There are 8 what we call kingdom of heaven parables. I say we call them kingdom of heaven. Actually, and I'll put the stats up there, but the first one and the, get this right, public education, and the 8th one, the first one and the 8th one do not contain the words kingdom of heaven. 2 through 6, or 2 through 7, explicitly say they're of the kingdom of heaven. I'll explain what that means. But here's what happens. Everybody tries to apply these to the church age and to Gentiles. Because, well, it's all about me, right? And what is a key? You could wonder what's inside of a box. You could wonder what's inside of a room. You could wonder what's inside of a house, but you can't get in because all of the above are locked. But if you had the key to the box, or you had the key to the room, or you had the key to the house, that lets you enter, and then you get to get your questions answered. Oh yeah, what's in here? Here's what's in here. So I'll tell you what these parables, what the general format of them is, And then we'll read them as applying to the people he gave them to. His people, the Jews. Remember, they had rejected the kingdom. When they rejected Christ, when they rejected their Messiah, the king, did they not also reject the kingdom? Yes, they did. And so it had to go into mystery form. There are 8 parables of the kingdom of heaven. Now, I put this in parentheses because I told you the term kingdom of heaven, those 3 words only appear in the parables 2 through 7, which means they are hardwired into Israel. Numbers 1 and 8 do not have that phrase. That doesn't mean necessarily that they are for us, but that means that we can find something in those that we can apply to our own lives, all right? What's the Bible? You take it historically, inspirationally, and doctrinally, correct? All right, doctrinally, 2 through 7, straight to Israel. 1 and 8, because it doesn't necessarily say kingdom of heaven, then we can get something inspirationally from them, all right? Of these parables, number 1, let me see here. 1 through 4 are given in public. In other words, when he starts giving these parables, he is talking to a public congregation. He's talking to whoever happens to walk up and listen. Numbers 5 through 8 are given in private only to the apostles. So the first 4 are given to the public, and then the crowd goes away. Then he gives the last 4 just to the apostles. But only number 1 is interpreted in public. And 2 through 8 are interpreted in private to the apostles. Now, you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's because you think it's all about you. You think if God says something to you, he's got to explain it. You know, I was talking to a guy one time. He was complaining, proving, I guess, that he was saved. But he said this about God. He goes, I just don't understand God. Well, come on, guys. You've been saved long enough for God to do something in your life that you didn't understand why he did it. Please. And he says, I just don't understand God. And I said, we are a walking, talking piece of dirt that uses 1/10 of its brain. But guys, if we used 100% of our brain, if we wanted to touch God, I feel like if I was operating at 100%, I feel like I'd be standing under the arch of his foot, and the top of that arch would be right above that. I couldn't even jump up and touch the arch of his foot. You understand? Because even at 100%, we are still finite, which means we have a limit. I've often said this, and if you study the Bible long enough, you'll hit this fence a lot. Our finite ability to understand is cordoned off by a chain link fence. So how do you know? Because I've hit that fence running. I mean, if you would like to find the limit of your ability, I mean, where you just smack into that thing, here's what you do. Go back to Genesis 1:1, and then go back to Genesis just before 1:1. And where was God? And who he made him, and who did he speak to, and when he said, let there be light, who flipped the switch? And he's always been. When you start thinking about the fact that God is eternal, every time I say that, my mind says, yeah, but when did he become eternal? When did he begin? and you will literally, I've been chasing stuff in the Bible, and just bam, just like, and I remember one time before I got saved, I was running across some backyards, never mind why, and I did meet a chain link fence very personally, and literally it left an impression on me, kind of a diamond pattern. But that's what's going to happen. You're going to run into your ability to understand. All right, so let's look at the first parable. And the first parable is Matthew 13, 1 through 23. It's actually one of the longest as far as text. This is the parable of the sower. All right, let's take a look at it. The same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the sea, and here it is, and great multitudes were gathered together unto him. So they went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. I think that is so classy. I think that is just so classy. The Lord just said he just gets on a ship because he's going to get pushed into the water or whatever. So he's maybe from here to that wall out in the water, and everybody can see him, and nobody can crowd him. And so he speaks to them, and he tells them this parable. Look at verse 3. And he spake many parables unto them, and spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. But others fell into good ground and brought forth fruit, some an 100-fold, some 60-fold, and some 30-fold. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. And the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest thou unto them in parables? And he answered, said unto them, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. Now, this is what I want to get across here. He explains this one. He interprets this one in public. He gives 4 of them in public and only explains one of them. And probably somebody, I know a lot of them were there because they wanted the free food. They wanted somebody healed in their family, whatever the case might be. But surely somebody was saying, he gave us 4 parables, and he explained the first one. What do the other 3 mean? He should have told us, if he's going to give us 4, he should have given us the answer. You know what this, if you can't learn anything else from that much, God is not always going to explain everything he does in your life. He is not always going to explain it. You say, why? It's just not for us to know. And I don't know if I ever said this when I was preaching here, but I'm going to give you a prayer, okay? The nice thing about giving prayers away is you can give someone the same prayer you use, and it doesn't diminish it, and it always works. And here's a prayer that I've used more times than I'd like to admit. It is okay, guys, to disagree with God, as long as you finish it with, but you're right and I'm wrong. You got to finish with that part, or, flashes of lightning and burnt spots on the earth might happen. But guys, look, don't sit there and say, well, I understand why God's doing this in my life. No, you understand why God's doing something in somebody else's life. Isn't it amazing how much insight God has given us into everybody else's grief? I broke my neck in 1973, and it is an absolute train wreck. And I can't tell you how many people on this earth God told them why he broke my neck. But he has never told me. But these guys can't understand why they didn't get a raise that they thought they had coming. And listen, I have said this to the Lord, okay? Now they disrespect, but I have said, I don't appreciate or I don't agree with what's going on in my life right now. And then I finish it with, but you're right and I'm wrong. And if nothing else, the fact that he gave 4 of these in public and only interpreted 1 in public, the fact that he didn't explain numbers 2, 3, and 4 to the very people he gave them to, the public, you ought to learn that he doesn't owe us an explanation on everything that goes on in our life. He doesn't owe that to us. And we're so self-centered, we think that it's all about me. And I'm sorry, God's just going to say, that's above your pay grade. But it's happening to me. I know. But it's still above your pay grade. You couldn't handle the answer if I gave it to you. That's what he's saying. So he gives this first one, and it is the parable of the sower. First one is, the seed falls on the wayside, and the soil is not good. The second one, the ground might be good, but there are stony places in it, And I would look at this as someone who did not get saved. The third one is the seed is falls among thorns, and they can't break free of the world. There's a lot of people that probably went to hell with, if not the exact words of, not Festus, Felix, no, not, was it Agrippa, where he said, Paul almost out-persuaded me to be a Christian. And there are some people that have seen they've that salvation was true, that they were on their way to hell, and they counted the cost and said, I'm still not doing it. You know, my dad and mom, they were Romanian by background. My mother was she was the stereotypical 1950s housewife. My mother never learned to drive. My dad took her everywhere she wanted to go. It wasn't, in fact, one time my sister tried to teach her how to drive. We did that once. But, and my dad rejected the gospel because he was self-righteous. My mom rejected the gospel because my dad rejected the gospel. My mom could have gone soul winning. She knew it so well. My mother knew she was going to hell. I talked to her one time and I said, Mom, you know you're going to hell, don't you? She says, yep. But her attitude was, if John's not getting saved, I'm not getting saved. And that went on for 12 years. And it was September 19th, 1982. They came up to the church I was pastoring upstate New York. And Sunday night, we had a missionary preaching. And he gave the invitation. And my dad, like when we sat down to eat, my dad would make a point of getting a bite of food before I could pray. That was kind of his slap. He always did something to give me a little slap. And when the missionary had him stand for prayer at the invitation, my dad had a cane. It was one of those 4-pronged canes, you know. And I saw it hit the aisle, and I thought, oh, he's going to walk. He wants to walk out where everybody can see him walk out. That's going to be a slap. But he turned the wrong direction. He turned toward the altar. My dad came down that night to get saved, and my mom was right on his heels. And we were kneeling at the altar, and I am leading my dad to the Lord, and right beside me, my wife is leading my mom to the Lord. And my mom, she was not going to get saved if he didn't get saved, but if he did, you couldn't have kept her away from salvation. Brother, you could have put a brick wall between her and salvation, all right? So is that one? There are people, they see it. But something in this world, they go, a lot of Jews, a lot of Amish people. They get the gospel and they go, man, I need to get saved. But if I do, they're going to kick me out of my family. I will be shunned. I will be ostracized. I will be cut out of my society. I can't take that. Or I'll have to give this up. I wouldn't doubt at all. Many people in Hollywood got the gospel and they thought, I can't make the movies I'm going to make. I can't make the money I'm going to make. I can't have the fame I'm going to have. It's the thorns, all right? So you have that problem. Now, I want you to notice, let me see. There's a verse here. Look at verse 23. And who receives seed into the good ground is he that heareth the word and understandeth it. That is not what I want. Oh, I'm looking, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, verse 21. Verse 21. Yet hath he not root in himself, but dureth for a while. For when tribulation or persecution ariseth because of the word, by and by he is offended. And people, this is kind of a proof text for this guy that thinks he's going halfway through the tribulation. You're going to end up with tribulation. And he says that, and guys, look, there's two kinds of trouble that come your way. And they can be described as tribulation and persecution. Now, with that in mind, I want you to go to Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, to a parallel to this. And I want you to see the change in the word tribulation. Look at verse 17. And have no root in themselves, and so endure but for a time, after which affliction or persecution arise for the word's sake. Let me tell you what affliction is. The difference between affliction or tribulation. I'm not talking about the tribulation. I'm talking about tribulation, okay? The Lord said, in this world you will have tribulation. You don't need to be, you know what? If all the tribulation you ever had in your life only amounted up to 7 years, you get off light, wouldn't you? Yeah. But affliction and tribulation. Affliction are the natural consequences of life. That's running over a nail and getting a flat tire. That's making a wrong turn. That's speeding just when the cops set up the speed trap. It's just stubbing your toe in the middle of the night. There's problems. There's trouble. There's tribulation. It's going to happen. It's getting a headache. Persecution is trouble that comes your way because somebody aimed it at you. Tribulation, everybody's going to get. Persecution, you wouldn't get unless somebody that didn't like you aimed it at you. It can be from your family. Sometimes family members will persecute you. It can be school-related. It can be job-related. It can be Christian-related, where maybe here's a guy, he's like the next guy to be promoted. He's obviously the best guy, but the guy that does the promoting doesn't like him because he's a Christian, so he picks somebody up under him and puts him above him. Or gives him a hard time because he has his Bible on his desk. So there are persecution and tribulation, and some people can't take that, guys. Nobody likes that. I mean, nobody likes that, okay? If you did like it, I'd worry about you. But people have some problems. Here's what it says as far as affliction it says, John chapter 16, verse 33, these things have I spoken to you, that in me you might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. So we're not going to escape tribulation, but we are not going to go through the tribulation. And so what we learn from this, this parable, if you want to know the truth, it's the parable of the sower, correct? But it's not the parable of the seed. It's the parable of the sower and what he's doing, correct? Because here's what we always look at the seed. Well, what's the seed? Isn't the seed the Word of God? Well, there's nothing wrong with the seed. There's something wrong with the ground. There's nothing wrong with the sower. He is sowing it the same way every place he goes. There's something wrong with the ground, correct? But what does he talk about? He talks about the sower and the seed. And I think what you and I can learn from this is that it is not for you or I to judge the soil. You have no idea how many times somebody says, boy, if I witness this guy, he's going to blow up. And you witness to him, and he doesn't blow up. Well, that guy will never receive this. And he receives it. I've had it time and again where I remember one time I was working this job when I was down Bible college, and I wanted to witness to my boss. And the school year was coming to the end, and I hadn't witnessed to him, and I said, Lord, give me a chance to witness to him. So one day I'm in a neighborhood. I'm the only painter in the neighborhood. I'm working in a house. Who shows up but the boss? And it was kind of funny. The Lord said, okay, you asked for this. This is your chance. And so I did what any good Christian would do. I prayed for the rapture. And once again, the Lord let me down. And his name was Mr. Tomlin. And he's walking away. I said, Mr. Tomlin. I said, have you ever trusted Jesus Christ, your personal Savior? And I kind of braced myself. And he would come over and he goes, what did you ask me? And I thought, oh man, I'm getting fired. Well, we got 2 more weeks anyway, That's why I didn't witness to him 9 months ago. But I said, I asked if you ever trusted Jesus Christ, your personal Savior. And he said, I did that when I was 16 years old at a Methodist camp meeting. Thanks for asking me. And I said, well, I care about souls and all that, But here's the thing, guys. In fact, could I give you a thought? The Bible talks about some sow, some water, some reap, right? And there may be a time when like when I say this about missionaries, Christians will say this, God, what mountain do you want me to climb? What ocean do you want me to cross? And I'm going to tell you, God doesn't want every one of you to climb a mountain. Yeah. But I'll guarantee he wants every one of you to climb somebody's porch steps to witness to him. He doesn't want every one of you to cross an ocean. But I will guarantee, and you all heard this one, you ever been in a room and God didn't want you to cross an ocean, but he wanted you to cross a room? And he said, go talk to that person for me. And your reaction was, oh no, they'll blow up. Did you ever stop and think that if he pointed somebody out, he's already got them ready? I remember one time, because we were on the road, we'd be in truck stops a lot. And we were at a huge truck stop, just got done eating, and we're walking away, and we're walking out. We're about to go back, get in the rig, and take off. And sure as I'm standing here, man, the Lord just said, stop and look around. And I looked around, And there's truck drivers everywhere. Some of them on the phone, some of them eating, maybe a couple of them together, mostly guys by themselves. And way over against this wall is a black guy reading a newspaper. I assumed he was a truck driver. And God said, go give him a gospel tract. And I will be honest, there's times when I would have argued with it, but I think I got this thing down now, that it's safe. He can't kill me with all these witnesses. And so I went back over to him, and I said, excuse me. And I'm telling you, man, he put the paper down, and he did not want to be bothered. I said, are you a truck driver? He said, yes. And I told him the truth. I don't flatter people, but guys, you don't know how many times I've been going into or coming out of a truck stop, and I see a guy, and I go, are you a truck driver? And they'll go, yeah. I said, well, I appreciate what you do. You understand that the clothes on your back, you got them because the truck driver brought them? And the food you ate tonight, you got it because the truck driver brought it. And the chairs you're sitting on them because the truck driver. Would you just get out of the left lane and let them alone? Okay? Quit getting in the left lane and slow them down and show that you got a right. Get out of their way. They're bringing your stuff. And I said, well, first off, I'll let you know. I said, I appreciate what you do. I said, I know that I don't have anything that a truck driver didn't bring me. And he kind of softened up. And I said, I want to tell you something. I said, I'm a Baptist preacher, Baptist evangelist, travel the roads all the time preaching. And I said, I was just leaving here. My wife and I had lunch. And I had our little tract that we carry, Let Not Your Heart Be Troubled. And I pulled that tract out. And I said, before I left here, I said, God told me to come over and give this to you. And he just went, thanks. And I walked away. You say, why didn't you tell him more? God told me to give him a tract. I'm not going any farther than God wanted me to go. But as I walked out of that room, I looked back, and he wasn't reading the paper. He was reading that tract. I was talking to a guy in Ohio, and he has a ministry to truckers, and something wild happened to him. He said he was walking across there, there was a great big black truck driver, and he said the Lord didn't tell him to witness to it, didn't tell him to give him a tract. He said, here's what he said, go ask him if he'd like to get saved today. And he goes, God, I can't do that. Go ask him if he wants to get saved today. And so he goes up and he stops this guy. And nobody likes to be stopped, you know. He goes, excuse me. This guy's just a big bull of a guy. And he goes, what? Oh, never mind. I forgot what I was going to say. No, he said this. He said, would you like to get saved today? He said, this guy teared up and began to blubber. And he said, yes, I would. My wife's been after me for 20 years. And he bowed his knees and got saved right in the spot. But you see, that's what I'm telling you. When God says cross the room, you think he wants you to go cold turkey against somebody. You don't know that maybe the day before somebody witnessed to him. He's got the ground prepared, okay? So it is not for us to judge the ground. How many times have you thought, in fact, I always tell people, if you got saved late in life, you suffered under 2 false assumptions like I did. When we get saved late in life, we think the first one is our friends and family have not heard the gospel, and the second one is they'll be excited when we tell them. Man, I thought my drinking buddies were just wringing their hands at Old Timers Bar waiting for me to tell them the gospel. Whoa, it was not so. I thought my dad and mom and my brother and sister, I thought they would be so excited when I told them. Man, I'm telling you, they didn't want to hear it. You understand? And so you look at somebody and say, they'll be easy and they'll be difficult. I won't go to the difficult. And you don't know nothing. And you don't have to know. You only have to sow the seed. And that's what we get from that parable. The second parable is Matthew 13, actually 24 through 30. And this is the parable of the tares. Now, this is one of those where guys who are like us of Gentile background get all messed up because they try to equate this to our rapture. Look at verse 24. Another parable put he forth to them, unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven, now this is the first time he's used that phrase. So if it's to the kingdom of heaven, he's not talking to Gentiles. He's talking to Jews. These guys just passed up the kingdom of heaven. He's going to tell them what's in the future for it. The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while he slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sirs, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? And he said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? And he said, Nay, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Now watch, let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Now, when we go to heaven, he's going to gather us and take us out of the world, right? It doesn't say he's going to gather the tares together. So where's he going to gather the tares together to be burned? Well, take a look at Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. And Revelation chapter 12 is the chapter in the Bible that really gives us the entire millennium. Chapter 20. It's right next to chapter 12. Chapter 20. And look what he says, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand, laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is called the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. One of the things some people think about the millennium is they think it's going to be like the new heaven, new earth. No war, no disease, everybody's going to get along just great. Guys, let me tell you what the world of the millennium is going to be. The same world you're living in right now. It is going to be exactly like this one. The difference will be twofold. Number one, there will be no demoniac influence. The devil will be bound. You say, oh, that's good. No, it's not so good. You know why? Because now you can't say the devil made me do it. Because no man's going to find out. Think about it. Here's what people say. Well, you know, if we just had a good government, I would be happy about it. Well, the second thing about the millennium is it's not going to be run by a president in this country and a king in England and somebody else's prime minister. It's going to be run by Jesus Christ sitting on a throne in Jerusalem. So you know the government's going to be good and no satanic influence. Oh, then it's going to be a wonderful time. Yeah, so wonderful that when the devil shows up 1,000 years later, the whole world comes up against Jesus Christ. Do you ever notice how people that say don't judge, judge? You ever talk to somebody that they like dies, and they'll go, we'll see him, he's in heaven. And if they don't like him, they'll go, boy, he's in hell. Isn't it funny how they all think they're God? They really do. You upset them, and you're going to hell, and you make them happy, and you're going to heaven. And we get to the end of this 1,000 years, mankind is going to get tired of it. It's kind of like, I don't watch it, but I've seen a little bit of it. You know these court programs where, you know, me and I'm the landlord and there's the renter, and we're taking each other to court on TV because I think when I go there, the judge is going to hear my side, he's going to thump my renter. And the renter thinks when he gives his side, he's going to tell the evil landlord where to get off. And he rails on both of us. You know, he starts railing on the renter, and I'm going, good, he needed that. You know, don't smile too, pal, because let me tell you what your problem is. And, you know. And that's what's going to happen. After 1,000 years, people are going to get tired of God being so smart that he can't see how right I was. And that's basically what it is. Guys, have you ever seen that? You know, if you have a situation in your life, a bad situation, a difficult situation, you pray about it. Let me ask you a question. Don't say amen. But do you really pray about it? I mean, do you really say, God, take care of it? Or do you, like me, tell God how he should take care of it? I mean, I don't tell him, Lord, take care of this. I just tell him how he should, and the reason he should is because this is how it ought to be done, but he's got the power, I don't have the power. And here's how I look at this. See, I write up my script. I pass it on to heaven for God to read. And all he's got to do is obey it. And here's why I think this. You say, oh, you're very proud. No, I'm not proud at all. Let me ask you a question. Isn't God always right? And doesn't he know everything? Then he must know I'm right. I just figure when God reads my script, he's going to go, whoa, Gipp, this is your stuff. I never expected this good stuff from you. And you know what God does? He reads my script, tosses it over his shoulder, and goes about doing what he wanted to as though he were God. Isn't that true? So people are going to go to Jesus Christ, just like you see him on TV, and they're going to think, boy, this is God himself. He's going to agree with me, and he doesn't. And in 1,000 years, they're going to want to kill him. Absolutely. Look what it says in verse 7, Revelation chapter 20. And when 1,000 years were expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is the sand of the sea. Now, I'm going to tell you how I see this. You ever see any of those old Cecil B. DeMille films about the Mideast? You know, like the opening scene is nothing but sky and desert. And you hear the boom, 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 boom. And like the entire horizon, it's an army, like army ants, coming over it, and they're marching on a city. And every time I see, that's what I think. I think, here's Jesus Christ. He's in Jerusalem. The devil goes out. He gives his pitch to the nations, and he says, let's go out. Let's go to Jerusalem and get him. And so it's boom, 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 and they surround the city. And look at verse 9. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about and the beloved city. And I can just see this, guys. I'm sorry. But I can just see they got the whole place surrounded. I mean, it's like outside of Jerusalem. It is wall-to-wall people there to kill Jesus Christ. And I can just see the devil going, we got you surrounded. What are you going to do now? And look at the last half of the verse. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. You know, think of how long it must take the devil to gather this army together. Months? I don't know. And its destruction isn't even a whole verse. It's half of a verse. I'm sorry, I kind of feel like Wile E. Coyote trying to take over New Jerusalem, you know? I can see the devil going, we got you surrounded. We've had it with you. What are you going to do about it now? Poof. Oh, that's it. The tares are gathered together that they get burned. That's what it's talking about in that second parable. So the second parable is a parable of the tares, and he is going to, it's going to be during the kingdom of heaven. It's going to be during the millennium. The third parable. The third parable is the parable of the mustard seed. Oops. They gave me a marker that can't count. And it's only verses 31 and 32. And it's the parable of the mustard seed. Now, how many times have you heard this as, you know, the gospel is just a mustard seed, and you put it out, and, you know, it's going to multiply itself, and it's going to infect the whole world. Guys, that's great preaching, but got to remember something. Good preaching is not always good teaching. Has the gospel been around for 2,000 years? Okay, so be honest. Would you say, when you look at what's going on in this country and this world, that it's just about taking over the entire globe? It seems we're farther from that happening right now than 50 years ago, than 25 years ago, than 10 years ago. So this parable is a future state of Israel as a world power. Go to Ezekiel chapter 39. Ezekiel chapter 39. And Ezekiel chapter 39, here's what in Matthew, verses 31, here's what it says. I'll read the parable. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest among herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Now, the birds of the air in the Bible are never good. There's always something demoniac about the birds, okay? And here's my question. I want you to look at this in Ezekiel chapter 39. It talks about there being a battle, and it's with Gog and Magog, incidentally. And the Bible tells about, I'm looking for the exact verse if I've got it down. But it says for 7 years they're going to be burying the dead and putting stuff away from this battle. Somebody say something? Yeah, that's it. I was going to say that. Yes, thank you, sister. Anyway, so they're doing this for 7 years. Let me ask you a question. Where are those 7 years? Well, it can't be the tribulation. Because during the last half of tribulation, Israel's running for their life. And the first half is God destroying or wreaking havoc on this earth. And the only place I can find 7 years that would be, I mean, think about this. If the enemies of Israel went against Israel, and Israel absolutely, utterly, and completely destroyed them, wouldn't that be some of the best times of Israel? Guys, I'm not against my country, but let me tell you, if there's anybody who has kept peace from coming to the Mideast, it is the United States. In 1956, Israel and England and France, Egypt was getting ready to close the Suez, and Israel and England and France invaded the Suez. And President Eisenhower put a stop to it. At the same time, by the way, he was interested in world peace. Well, at the same time, the Hungary, there was a rebellion against communism, and Eisenhower didn't do anything about that. So we stopped peace in 1956. Everybody, or some of you know about the Six-Day Gulf War, 7-day, 6-day war in 1967, and you know who put a stop to that? Us. In 1973, that was the Yom Kippur War. They caught the Jews off guard, the Egyptians, the Syrians, they attacked. And I don't know how many months it was, maybe only a month. But by the end of that war, Ariel Sharon had crossed the Suez into Egypt with the Third Army of Israel, had the Egyptian Second Army surrounded, and was on its way to Cairo. He was about to take the capital of Egypt. And we stopped it. And in 1982, they took an incursion up into Lebanon because they kept firing rockets down on them, and we stopped it. And under Bush, we're the ones that told them they kept, remember, all this land for peace, and Bush put pressure on them to give Gaza back to the Philistines, Palestinians. And if you had half a brain, everybody that had half a brain said, if they give Gaza back to the Muslims, all it's going to be is a launching point for missiles. And that's all it is. Land for peace, they got the land, nobody got peace. And we have been the problem. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the third most powerful army in the world right now is Israel. And what I wonder, and I say wonder, but if you remember the 7 bad years in Egypt, the 7-year drought, what preceded the 7-year bad years? 7 good years. Good years like they never saw. And I wonder, and I say wonder, I'm telling you, I'm not teaching this, but I want to give it to you so that maybe if something happens, you'll go, oh, I heard that once. I wonder if there will not be an exchange militarily between the United States and possibly Russia. And the end of that is that it's kind of like two heavyweights, and they beat each other to a pulp. And then Israel whips all of its enemies around it, and now they got a time of peace like they've never seen, and all they're waiting for is their Messiah to show up. And so there's 7 good years that come before the 7 bad years. But the Bible says that this is the grain of mustard seed, and Israel is like that. In fact, who's going to run this world? Who's the world given to ultimately? The Jews. The Jews. So, do you ever look on a globe, how small Israel is? I mean, if you look on a globe, it's barely, it might be a 1/16 of an inch wide and maybe a 1/4 inch tall. Think about that little grain of mustard seed is going to be running the entire globe, east to west, north to south, every bit of it. So that grain of mustard seed is about Israel someday reigning over the entire world. I don't have any problem with it. The fourth parable. The fourth parable, Matthew chapter 13, verses 33 through 37. And this is the parable of the leaven. Now this one almost gets comical. It almost gets comical when you look at it like a typical Gentile or like a trying to apply to our age, because here's what they say: well, the leaven is like the gospel, and we preach it until it covers the whole world. Hey guys, in the Bible, somebody quick, do you need a whole lot of help with this? Is leaven positioned, looked at in the Bible as good or bad? It's always bad. Let me tell you what the first mention of it is. The first mention of leaven in the Bible is Exodus chapter 12, verses 15, 19, 20, 34, and 39. But this is the first Passover. And you know what they're told to do? Get the leaven out of your household. In fact, there's an entire feast of unleavened bread, not a feast of leavened bread. Leaven is found in the Bible as a type of sin. So we're gonna equate the gospel to sin. You can if you want. You can write these down in Exodus chapter 23, verses 18, chapter 34, verse 25, Leviticus chapter 2, verse 11, Leviticus chapter 6, verse 17, Leviticus chapter 10, verse 12, and Deuteronomy chapter 16, verses 3 and 4. Leaven is excluded or forbidden in any sacrifice that a Jew makes. So, and in Matthew chapter 16, verses 6 and 11, he berates him and tells his apostles, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. So there's no positive reference of leaven. There's no positive reference of leaven in the New, or there's, no positive reference to leaven in the New Testament. I will give you 3 places where leaven is mentioned in a positive manner, just because I want to give you the other side. But I've already given you, I can give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can give you about a dozen that put leaven as bad. But Leviticus chapter 7, verse 13, and 23, verse 17, and Amos chapter 4, verse 5. All right? Now, what does this parable say? Look at verse 33. Another parable spake he unto them, the kingdom of heaven, there it is again, is like unto leaven which a woman took, and hid in 3 measures of meal, until the whole was leavened. All these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables. Without a parable spake he not unto them, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world. Ladies, don't get mad at me. But traditionally in Scripture, God doesn't use women. He used Deborah in Judges chapter 4. But he uses men. And you had the Queen of Heaven that is mentioned. And the Queen of Heaven today is the Roman Catholic Church. They call it Mary. But we get the book of Revelation, we hear about the great whore. And that great whore is the Roman Catholic Church. And what I ponder is the Roman Catholic Church busy corrupting? Take a look at Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. And Proverbs chapter 6. And look what it says in verse 26. For by means of a whorish woman, a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. So somebody, some woman is going to be corrupting this world. You know what they say a rattlesnake will do if something's about to kill it? It'll bite itself. It'll bite itself and inject its poison into its flesh, kind of like, maybe you're going to kill me, but you ain't going to eat me. That's what it is. Have you ever heard anybody say, well, if I can't have them, nobody else can? And so this is going to be the Roman Catholic Church. Now, in the explanation, there are 3 measures that she hides this in. Look at verse 33. She hid it in 3 measures of meal. So she's corrupting 3 measures. So there's 3 things she's corrupting. So I'm trying to think, I try to think, and you can take it or leave it, but I try to think of 3 things that are grouped together. All right, one of them is past, present, future. But that can't be the explanation because this whole parable is about the future. So the past and the present, as the Lord is talking, it can't be the past, present, and future. The other 3 I think about are, could she be the Roman Catholic Church, could she be corrupting the Jews, the Gentiles, and the Church of God? Because those are the 3 groups. But that can't be it because we're going to be out of here. That leaves only 2. But I know of 3, and that is body, soul, and spirit. And when you can get a hold of somebody's body, soul, and spirit, you have utterly and completely corrupted them. Let me tell you something. You know, we think of what went on in Canaan, and if you want to know how bad Canaan was, start reading your Bible around verse Leviticus about 16, and read to verse 20. And you will read the most horrendous sins, the most vile things that took place in the land of Canaan. And we always think of God judging a nation because of how wicked their sins are, correct? Okay, so all right, years ago they used to do this. Now they don't because I guess they don't want to stop it. But years ago, if you had tuberculosis, they did 2 things when somebody had tuberculosis. Number 1, they treated it. But number 2, they quarantined them. Why'd they quarantine them? So they wouldn't spread it. And God had to destroy Canaan not just because of their sin, but he had to keep them from infecting the entire known world with the things you read about in Leviticus chapter 17 through 20. I love my country, guys, but if I could, you know that big Hollywood sign out there on the hill? What they ought to have underneath that is right out of Genesis chapter 6. Their imagination is only evil continually. And I would tell you 2 things. Number 1, I was preaching in New Zealand, and the natives in New Zealand were the Maoris. They're Polynesian, they're tribal, and when the white men came to New Zealand, they never conquered them or tried to. They never took their land. Everything the white men wanted, they paid for, and not with just a few beads and some gold. I mean, they paid fair prices, and the whites and the Maoris got along tremendously. There was never a problem between those 2 races. In fact, there's a sign outside of Auckland called One Tree Hill. And there was a tree on top of this hill that was a symbol of how the whites and the Maoris got along with no problem. Today, the Maoris present themselves as a persecuted group by the dirty white man, and one of the Maoris got so mad he went and cut down a tree. You know when the change happened? When American television got piped into New Zealand. And a guy told me, he said, when American TV got piped into New Zealand, the Maoris took on the persecuted race of blacks and started hating white folks. So here is something, there was no problem, and we exported our wickedness. Do you understand? And I wonder sometimes, there's some things going on in our country that are evil. And God may judge us for it, but he may judge us just because he can't afford to let us take it anywhere else. Let me tell you what I don't believe in. I don't believe that, if you're going to preach on rock music, you listen to 100 hours of the worst stuff that there is. I had a guy one time when I was in Bible college. Now, when I was in Bible college, the bad movie was Rosemary's Baby. And I know what it was about. I've never seen it. I had the opportunity. No, I'm not interested in it. But this student, the fellow student, he's a couple years behind me. He said, I'm going to go see Rosemary's Baby. I said, we don't go to movies. Why are you going to go see that? And here's how innocent. He said, well, I want to preach against it. And I can't very well preach against it if I don't know what it's about. What do you think? I said, well, I hope you never want to preach against drug addiction. Hope you never want to preach against adultery. And if you want to preach against homosexuality, I don't want to be around during the research. You see what I'm saying? So I don't study that stuff. But let me tell you what I did one time. I'm in a motel room. My wife isn't there. I'm watching a football game. Now, you ladies know this. Men never watch commercials during football games. They find another football game. But you remember when there was only like 20 stations you could find it? Now there's like 800. So I'm going through this thing in a commercial, and I came across, I can't remember what it's called, but I think it was HBO, had some kind of a 1-hour series on, you remember the Vampire Rage? Or True Blood or something like that. It was something about blood. And here's what, now look, I am owned by God, okay? And here's what I told my owner. I said, God, this does not interest me. But I said, I am going to give this subject 60 minutes of my life. I am going to watch this one program because I know my fellow Christians are watching stuff about vampires, and I want to see what it is that they're looking at. I'm going to tell you something. I watched 10 minutes of it, and it was so vile, I cannot describe it in mixed company here. I've never seen anything so horrendously vile. You know how I knew it was of the devil? Now, guys, you don't say men here, but you know how wicked your imagination can be? This was more wicked than the normal imagination. This was something you couldn't imagine. It had to come from hell. And I saw 10 minutes of it, shut it off. And what I thought was not God is going to destroy us for this. I thought God is going to destroy us so we don't spread this around the world. And so God may end up destroying this nation if for no other reason, just because he's got to keep us clean. So I can see this great whore, she wants to get a hold of the body and the soul and the spirit, because when you got all three, you got them. The fifth parable. The fifth parable is Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. And it's the parable of the treasure in the field. Now, I've heard preachers try to make this a gospel application and talk about, you're investing in the field. Look at verse 44. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, the which when a man hath found, he hideth, and for joy thereof goeth out and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field. And I've heard guys say that about the gospel. Guys, I'm sorry, you got to do a lot of twisting to put the gospel in this. You say, well, what could it be? I am not an investor. I don't think it's wrong to invest. I don't think it's wrong to invest in the stock market or anything like that. Somebody says, well, it's gambling. Well, I don't know if it's gambling or not. But I don't do it because I'm not bright about that. But, all right, who is ultimately going to rule this world? I know Jesus Christ, but I'm talking about what people? We already discussed it. The Jews. It's probably been closer to 15 years than I like to admit. But does anybody remember listening to Rush Limbaugh when he was advertising Snapple? They paid him to advertise Snapple, and when he started advertising Snapple, it was selling for $25 a share. 1 year later, it was $250 a share. Don't you wish you'd hung on, you grab some of that up? Now, see, it's probably, he didn't advertise anymore. You very seldom see it. It's probably down to like $2.50 a share, and I would still have some Snapple stock if I'd have bought it. I'd waited too long. But now, there's guys that know about investment, and they see a company starting out, and they go, I'm going to invest in that. And that thing turns into a gold mine. I don't know if you know this, but Bill Gates, and I can't remember the other guy, but there were two men that invented the personal computer. Bill Gates was one of them, and his buddy. And when they finished building this personal computer, they talked about its future, and they established this. There will never be a market in the United States for any more than 5,000 personal computers. We'll never sell more than 5,000 of these. So the partner sold his half to Bill Gates, who probably came up with that statistic. And I saw a special. You know what the partner's doing now? I think he's in Washington State, and he's a doctor. I think he might even be a pediatrician. But you think he's back at that going, I had it in my hand, right? But what if somebody would have said, I'll invest in that personal computer? Would that not be something to get into? What if somebody would have invested in Amazon when it was just nothing but selling books? Would that not be worth something? All right. This parable of the treasure in the field, I think the world is a field, but this is somebody who knows ultimately Israel's going to be on top, and I'm going to invest in Israel. Literally, I mean, look what it says in Jeremiah chapter 32. Jeremiah chapter 32. You say, you really think that Israel is the treasure? Well, if I didn't, I might start when I read my Bible. Here's 2 verses for you to write down. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 says this. God says, now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, talking about to Israel, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. Psalm 135, verse 4. For the Lord hath chosen Jacob unto himself, and Israel for his peculiar treasure. So any man who understands that one of these days, I mean really, all right, I wasn't around in 1948, but I've read about it. And the British mandate for Israel was going to run out for Palestine on May 14th, 1948. And on May 14th, 1948, Israel was going to come back into being as a nation. And everybody knew that as soon as that happened, the Muslims were going to attack the Arabs. On May 14th, 1948, Israel became an independent nation for the first time in several thousand years, about 1,000 years. 14 Muslim nations attacked them that day. Now, come on, guys. Here's a people that aren't even a country yet, and the day they don't have any military. And the day they become a country, 14 nations attack them. Would anybody like to figure out how this is going to turn out? I'll tell you how it's going to turn out. The 14 nations are going to end up fighting over who gets to take care of the land they just took away from all those dead Jews. And Israel whipped all 14 of them. Israel went up to Europe and bought B-17s, bombers, and didn't take delivery. They loaded them with bombs. Flew them back to. Before they ever landed, they flew their first combat. Bought the planes and the bombs and flew over and dropped the bombs and then landed on Israeli territory. But now, what if somebody said this? On May 13th, 1948, you're around and somebody says, man, I got a chance to buy some land in Israel. And you go, you do? Oh, yeah, man. And I bought it too, but I got it at a good price. You've been watching the news? You've been reading? Do you know what's going to happen? Oh, yeah, man, they're going to be an independent country, and I got some of the ground in it, man. I'm invested. Do you understand what's going to happen when we become an independent country? Yeah. They're going to be attacked by the Arab countries. They're going to be overrun, and your land is going to be, it's going to be a bunch of Muslim farmers living on it. Boy, wouldn't that guy look like a fool? Somewhere around the end of May, early June, when Israel won, I got to say, yeah, you're right. I bought that 5 acres of ground in Israel. I should have bought 100. The smart man bets on Israel. And that's what that treasure in the field is. This is a man, I mean, guys, stop and think about it. How many nations, don't the Muslims always say, their big thing is, we're going to wipe Israel off the map? Have you ever noticed in your Old Testament how many nations that was their goal? They're going to wipe Israel off the map, and you can't find the nation that was going to wipe Israel off the map. Babylon was going to do it. Chaldea was going to do it. Persia was going to do it. Media was going to do it. All those nations that were going to wipe Israel off the map aren't on the map. Isn't that true? And guys, if you're going to bank on something, I would bank on the Jews coming out on top. And it's not just because of them, it's because of God's blessing, okay? The sixth parable. Aren't you glad there's not 100 of these? The sixth parable is Matthew chapter 13, verses 45 and 46. And this is the parable of the pearl of great price. Now, this is not a Mormon publication. All right, let's look at it. Matthew chapter 13, verses 45. Whoops. Oh, I didn't show you Ezekiel chapter 32. Yeah, Jeremiah. That's what I meant. When I say Jeremiah, when I say Ezekiel, you get to Jeremiah as fast as you can. And look what it says. Israel is being carried off. Isn't Jeremiah the book where Israel's being carried off into captive over 3 times? 3 times. You think somebody was selling land cheap and right around now? I mean, it's like, hey, Ivan, you want to buy my farm? You always like my farm. You want my farm? That's because he knows that the Babylonians are going to come in and take them both away, and they're going to take the farm anyway, so he's going to try to turn a buck on it. Look what it says in verse 7. Behold, Hanamiel, the son of Shallum, thine uncle shall come unto thee, saying, buy thee my field that is Anathoth, for the right of redemption is thine to buy it. Now think about this, man. He knows they're about to get overrun. And he goes, hey, Jeremiah, you want to buy my field? I mean, anybody say, oh, yeah, you're going to sell it to me, and tomorrow we're both going to be in captivity, and I'll never set foot on this land, and you'll have my money. So Hanamiel, mine uncle's son, came to me in the court of the prison. He's in prison, for crying out loud. According to the word of the Lord, and said unto me, buy my field, I pray thee, that is in Anathoth, which is in the land, in the country of Benjamin. For the right of inheritance is thine, and redemption is thine. Buy it for thyself. Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. And I bought the field of Hanamiel, my uncle's son, that was in Anathoth, and weighed him the money, even 17 shekels of silver. And I subscribed the evidence and sealed it and took witnesses and weighed him the money in the balances. So I took the evidence of the purchase, both that which is sealed according to the law and custom, and that which is open. And I gave the evidence of the purchase unto Baruch, the son of Neriah, the son of Maaseiah, in the sight of Hanamiel, mine uncle's son, and in the presence of the witnesses that subscribed the book of the purchase, before all the Jews that sat in the court of the prison. So he's making sure everybody knows he bought this field. Let me ask you a question. What do you think every one of them Jews is thinking? You are an imbecile. First, you're in prison, pal. What do you think is going to happen to you? You're never going to get. And secondly, you're buying land that we're all going to be carried away here in the next couple of days, and you'll never set foot on it. And I charged Baruch before them, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take these evidences, this evidence of the purchase, both which is sealed, and this evidence which is open, and put them in an earthen vessel, that they may continue many days. Watch this. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, houses and fields and vineyards shall be possessed again in this land. You think if Jeremiah would have said verse 15 with all them Jews standing there, What if he'd have told his cousin, you ought to keep that land because one of these days, houses and lands and farms, everything's going to be back on this land. He'd go, you're out of your mind, Jeremiah. We're going to get wiped out. But that came true, and Jeremiah had the land. So that is a man that saw a treasure in the field and bought it, and ultimately, and wasn't he the only one that didn't get carried away? He was the one that got sent back. All right, sorry for passing that up. The pearl of great price. First off, in case you didn't know, in case you're foolish enough to eat them, oysters are repulsive. Okay? I ain't eating nothing that I don't have to swallow. It just kind of slides down. I'm telling you, there's something about an oyster. Well, I will not describe it. It has been described too graphically by too many people. But an oyster is repulsive. Isn't a pearl the result of an irritation in the oyster? Yeah. In fact, you know, they have pearl farms. And what they actually do is they pry the shell open and insert a grain of sand. And then it's an irritant. And so what the oyster does is it secretes something, and layer by layer, because the first layer probably might just fill in some little divots in this thing. Maybe after about 10 or 12 coatings, maybe it's finally round, but that thing is an irritant to the oyster, and it finally covers it, and it ends up being a pearl. And who doesn't like pearls? Okay, again, who is the irritant in this world? Talk about nations. It's Israel. And you know, I tell you where I take offense. I take offense when somebody like CNN tries to destroy some conservative by calling them anti-Semitic. There is nobody more anti-Semitic than CNN. There's nobody more anti-Semitic than a liberal. And when a liberal, all of a sudden they're on Israel's side because they think they can destroy somebody, I don't trust a liberal. But it's the oyster. Listen, the oyster's attempt to neutralize the irritation only increases its value. Right? The world's attempts to neutralize Israel only increase its value. I'm telling you, there are nations, you go get a map today, and you hang on to the world map, and there are nations on that map that when this whole thing's over will not be on that map. But I will bet my soul Israel will be on that map. And it's going to be, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but this, all right, you got Israel like right here, and this is the Nile. You know, Israel's never gotten the land. Israel has never gotten the land that God promised to them, because he said the land they're going to get is going to, Anyway, it's not just going to be this here. He said it's from the river of Egypt. It goes over to here, and then it goes up to the land of the Hittites, which is up in Turkey. The land that Israel's going to get is going to be something like that. So when somebody says God isn't, he's done away with the Jews, he hasn't even finished blessing them. He hasn't even totally fulfilled what he's going to give them. So, again, Israel is an irritant to the world, but Israel's going to be standing when everything else is going. The seventh parable. Now, what do I do with the green one? There it is. Matthew chapter 13, verses 47 through 50. And this is the parable of the net. Let's read it. Matthew chapter 13. Oh, a marker. Verse 47. Again, and this kingdom of heaven is in every one of these from 2 to 7. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a net that was cast into the sea and gathered of every kind, which when it was full, they drew to shore and sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but cast the bad away. So shall it be at the end of the world. The angel shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire, where there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. That is the end of those seven, the first seven. But what that is the kingdom of heaven is pursued by both good and bad. Today it's pursued by two groups. It is pursued by Israel. It's also pursued by postmillennialists. They think they're going to make the world a good place, and then Jesus Christ is going to say, wow, the neighborhood's good now, I think I'll move in. Urban renewal has happened. But I'm going to give you just some names of who's pursued the kingdom of heaven. And here's what I told you. I think I told you the other day. The goal of the United Nations is to bring in the kingdom without the king. They want the millennium. What did Hitler call his whole thing? The Third Reich, the 1,000-year reign. He thought he was bringing in the millennium. I'll tell you who fought to gain the entire world, Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, at the end of his life, all right, you have the globe. If you're looking down on the top of the globe, if you're looking from the North Pole, he literally covered 90 degrees. No kingdom ever went that far. That literally one solid kingdom, that it went from one end to the other. He covered 90 degrees of it. The Mongols tried to do it. The Egyptians tried to do it. In the 1600s, Spain tried to conquer it. In the 1800s, France and England fought each other trying to bring in the kingdom of heaven. In the 1940s, the Germans, actually the 1900s, they tried to bring it in. In the 1900s, the United States tried to bring it in. And in the 2000s, right now, the Muslims and the Chinese are trying to bring it in. They all want world power. Anytime somebody wants world power, what they're saying is, I want that kingdom on this earth. And they're not going to get it because you're not going to get it without the king. And all of those people that tried it, he said they'll end up in hell. Now, I'm not talking about saved people, but I'm telling you that the world, the people of the powers of the world that are after that kingdom without the king, not going to get it. Now you have the eighth one. And the eighth one is Matthew chapter 13, verse 52. And it's the parable of the scribe. Now, I told you, number 1 and number 8 do not have the words kingdom of heaven in them. Now, we know they're kingdom parables because they're all grouped together, but there's going to be something we can learn from this. Look at verse 52. And I think it's kind of funny. Look at verse 50. And he casts them, he's finishing up the seventh parable. And we have trouble understanding these, right? And he says this in verse 50. And shall cast them into the furnace of fire, there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Jesus saith unto them, now remember, he's now talking just to his apostles, just to the disciples. Jesus saith unto them, have you understood all these things? They say unto him, yea, Lord. You kidding me? I don't mean this with any disrespect. I told you I got to spend eternity with 11 of these guys. But sometimes I think of it, when I think of the Lord's ministry, I call it Jesus and the 12 stooges. These are the guys when he said, now guys, be careful of the leaven of the Pharisees. And they went, you said that because we didn't bring any bread. No, I mean their doctrine. That too. Yeah, I was going to say that next. He says, hey guys, they're going to kill me. And instead of anything going on like, oh no, we can't let that happen, or what are we going to do? He sees them talking, he goes, what are you guys talking about? Nothing. No, what are you guys talking about? No, it was nothing really. What were you talking about? When they get you, who's going to be the leader? And he gives he said it. He looked him right in the face and said, they're going to kill me, and in 3 days and 3 nights I'm coming back up. Which one of the 12 was sitting at the grave waiting for it to happen? 0. Or did I just do a white power salute? Anyway, this many. Anyway, and you're telling me that he gave these 7 parables, and these guys went, oh yeah, we got this. Who's you kidding, pal? And then he says, 52, then said he unto them, therefore every scribe which is instructed into the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which bringeth forth out of his treasure things old, new and old. All right, what is this? What's the scribe got to do? What does he do? He writes the book. What's the book? It is the Bible. I think that parable, as far as it applies to us, first off, for the Jews, it is believe what was written in the past. Their Bible are the 39 books of the Old Testament, correct? And are they not? In fact, go to 2 Chronicles, chapter 36. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 36, you do know that our Old Testament is what the Jews have as their Bible, Torah. But it's not in the same order. And the last book in the Jewish Bible is not Malachi like it is in our Bible, it's 2 Chronicles. And look how a Jewish Bible ends. Every Jew that reads a Bible today, reads his own Bible, here's what he ends up with, verse 22. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all the kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord God of heaven given me, and he hath charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. You know, it kind of ends like our New Testament. You know, we were talking before church, and the world's kind of tore up. And how many times heard anybody say this? But I read the last chapter, and I know who wins. And we read Revelation at the end, and we knew who's going to win, right? You know how the Jewish Bible ends? It ends with them, guys, get to Jerusalem. Get to Jerusalem. It's going to end with them. So somebody invests in that book. Teachers and preachers, anybody that invests their time in that book, in teaching it and in preaching it. Note this, though. Note what it says. Your pastor and I were talking about this. He brought this up. Where it says, heaven is like unto a man that is an householder. All right, isn't a house, that's what he's saying, the guy owns a house, right? And aren't they like bolted to the ground? You know, guys, I don't know if I'm going to have a mansion in heaven, but if I do, you're going to see me walking around the outside of it. You say, why? Making sure there's no wheels on it. Everything we lived in for 33 years had wheels on it. I don't want no wheels. I want something bolted to the ground. The pastor was talking about in 1 Timothy chapter 3, when it gives the qualifications for a pastor, it says no striker. And we have traditionally interpreted that as somebody that punches people. But we were talking, he made point of it, that a striker, like if you're camping and you're going to leave, don't you say we're going to strike camp? And the striker was the guy. The striker was the guy that pulled down the circus tent and packed it away for them to leave. And a striker by nature is the wanderer, the vagabond. Now, who is the vagabond in the Bible? Cain. Did you ever notice that Hollywood always makes a hero of the vagabond? I remember when I was a kid, there was a TV program about this guy at a motorcycle called Then Came Bronson. And you know how it'd start? There'd be a guy in his family station wagon with his wife and his screaming kids, and he'd be sitting at a traffic light, and Bronson would pull up on his Harley, and they'd look over each other, and the guy in the car would go, oh man, I wish I could be him. You know what they don't know? That guy on that bike says, man, I wish I could be him. They get tired of sleeping under a bridge. They get tired of sleeping under the ground, out in the ground. They get tired of sleeping under the sky. They get tired of not having something that is permanent. And God makes much of a householder, the world. And guys, remember this. Remember this. Look, I'm done, but I want to show you this. You know what this is? Isn't that a target? Okay. And God is right here. And when man shoots, when he wants to be right, He doesn't hit here. He don't hit here. He don't get here. He don't get this close. You know where man's arrow goes? In that clock. Man is never, we just missed it. Man is always 180 degrees away from God. He is always, if he knows which direction God wants to go, he doesn't go 3 degrees off. He goes 180 degrees off. The book of Jonah, there's the storm. He says, God wants you, he tells the mariners, Jonah says, God wants you to throw me overboard. You know what they said? Let's row harder. Easter. Easter was a pagan holiday, and it was celebrated at sunrise. And you know what people say that's about? They say that's about the Passover. You know when they celebrate the Passover? At even. Not early morning or late morning, not noon, not this far away. They're 180 degrees out. Let me ask you a question. You're going to heaven, and you got saved by grace, correct? And what does the world say you're saved by? Works. As far removed. You know who God's interested in? He's interested in the guy that's going to get stable, buy a house, set up a family, and that's what he wants, a householder. So Hollywood, look at every movie. It's Stallone, it's Schwarzenegger, it's Tom Cruise, it's Matt Damon. He's always the unattached wanderer, the striker, the guy that's, and they always make the householder envious of him. And then we go, yeah, I wish I could do that. No, you don't. Man, you know what you ought to do tonight when you go home? Thank God for your house. Really. If you got a house, you ought to say, thank God for this. Don't you ever look at any of them ramblers and say, boy, I wish I could be like them. You know, these guys, we moved a lot. We would move every 4 days. But some of these guys, these performers, they perform in one city on one night, and they're 1,000 miles away the next night, and 300 miles away the next night, and 500 miles away the next night. And if you think, oh, that'd be romantic, ask them if it's romantic. They can't stand it. And so God deals with that householder. So Hollywood's heroes are always vagabonds, but this is a man with possession. And he goes to the Bible, and he brings out old truths and new. Say, you think there's new truths in the Bible? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a timeless book. I'll show you one thing. It's not connected to what I'm talking to you about, but I'm going to show you how the Bible, all right, think about this. Doesn't the Bible say that when the Lord was talking to them on the road to Emmaus after his resurrection, he told them all of the Old Testament prophecies of him? He told them, he said everything the Bible had said about him that they had missed. And they never saw it until something happened, an event happened, and suddenly they're looking at their Old Testament different. Oh, man. Zechariah chapter 13, verse 6. What are these wounds in thine hands? That was about the Lord. Oh, man. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Yeah, he said that on the cross. When he had us get the colt, the foal of an ass. Yeah, that was from Zechariah. You understand? They had that, but they never saw it until an event happened, and then they looked at their Bible, and it read completely differently, correct? Now, I am going to read a scripture, and I will make you have a thought. Every one of you, when we read the scripture, you will all have the same thought. You are in my power. Cannot resist. Go to Isaiah chapter 30. Isaiah chapter 30. And I will read a verse. I will not say anything about it. And when I read the verse, everybody in this room, maybe not the kids, but every adult in this room will think the same thing. You'll all have the same thought. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 25. And there shall be upon every high mountain and upon every high hill rivers and streams of water in the day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. What'd you think of, Lou? The day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. Have him. Marine. Did anybody else think about September 9/11? Yeah. the great slaughter when the towers fall. 3,000 people died. Now, guys, I don't believe that's what that's talking about. I don't think that's talking about the towers falling. But when you hear the day of the great slaughter, the towers fall, let me ask you this. If you're a Bible reader and you read that verse on September 10th, 2001, it wouldn't mean a thing to you. And if you read it on September 12th, 2001, I'll bet you go, right? Why? Because an event happened and it made you see something that you didn't see before. And I am not prophesying because I don't know if this is going to happen or not. But you know what I think? I think that God could have an event happen in which we will read verses that we've read over and over and over, and suddenly we'll go, that's what that meant. Just an event. All those Old Testament prophecies of Jesus Christ, they were there all the time, and even as apostles didn't get it when they're eating across from him and sleeping on the same patch of ground. They never got it until an event happened. It was his resurrection. That's what it said. They never got this until his resurrection. And so we go to that book for things old and new. You say there's something new in there? Yeah. What is it? I don't know. I'm still waiting for the towers to fall. I'm still waiting for the event. Preacher.